District Board of Managers meeting. Our first order of business, please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our next order of business is the public comment period, and just because there are a couple of people in the chambers this evening, is there anybody that wishes to speak at the public comment period? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the approval of the agenda, and for that, to any of my colleagues, any changes to the agenda? Gents, Steve?
I have a change on the consent agenda. There's one adjustment to the managers' meetings from last month.
Sorry, can you clarify what you mean by that?
5.2 meeting minutes. There's one small change to the,
So
it was a motion that was made.
Okay, so what we'll do is they'll pull that off when we actually deal with the consent agenda. We'll pull that item off and then deal with that at that time. Okay. Anybody else? Joni, anything on your side? Seeing none, then I would entertain a yeah, Bruce?
Just want to make a note. We did get a revised agenda for our board retreat date is June 19th.
Correct.
Right? Okay. Oh, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries 5-0. Thank you, everybody. So the next item is the other old new business. Our first item, 4.1, our programs and projects update. Take it away, ladies.
Okay, the level of Prior Lake is still below the weir, so we're at 902.35, which it's been kind of hovering around that 902.5 area for, this graph is from the beginning of April, so we just really haven't seen any fluctuations yet this year. We did start boat inspections last month, so we've been inspecting Lower Prior, Upper Prior, and Spring Lake in May. We will add Fish Lake to the mix a few times just to get some data, but we don't have any from there yet. The inspectors inspected 1,256 boats, and they started on fishing opener, and through May 31st they had 509 inspections on Lower, 374 on Upper, and 373 on Spring. There were 3 times that they found plants that were on the boats when they were launching the boats. They were unidentifiable because they were dried up on the boat, so we're not sure if they were actually an invasive species or not, but they did make the boaters take it off. And then 31 times when they were exiting the lake, which was mostly the curly leaf pondweed, which there's a lot of this time of year. And they did have to call enforcement one time. A boater denied access to their live well. So they did call. He didn't come out to the launch before the boater left because he was exiting. So they did give him his license information, and I think it's up to the officer if he wants to follow up on that at this point. So everything seems to be going really well with that program this year. We are using waterfront restorations this year as opposed to water guards last year. So far we've had really good luck. Any questions on the boat inspections before I move on?
Yeah, go Bruce.
Bruce. Oh.
Or, sorry, Kurt, the new Bruce.
I have a question on the eyelid camera. How are we supposed to see the other side of the boat? Because if they pull in there, especially if they get turned around before they get out to where the camera is, and they back into the dock, how are they going to see the left side of the boat? Because the cameras can only capture the right side, right?
Right, yeah.
So
we can't.
You can't. Well, no, that's I'm wondering. No, that's I'm wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't see the other side of the boat.
Yeah, you
All right,
can
thank you.
see if there's vegetation hanging down like from,
Well, that way,
from
yeah,
the boat.
sure,
But yeah,
sure.
it's just,
Okay.
it's the best we can do unless we wanted to install another camera on the other side. We could. It would cost literally twice as much money. So, yeah, so, I mean, this is kind of a test year, so we'll just kind of see how it goes. And if we do want to do that next year, you know, we could certainly look at that at the end of the year. Thank you. Yeah.
Jamie, I did want to ask, so I'm going to gather just by enforcement called on the inspection of the live well. Does that mean that those have to be emptied when they're coming into the lake? Is that why that would have been an
well,
issue?
He was, I don't know, if coming into the lake, I don't know. He was leaving the lake. So what they said is they thought that maybe he had too many fish in there that they didn't want
Okay,
us to see.
gotcha, okay.
It's just speculation, but
Yeah. I was just curious why somebody might deny, and that's a
Right.
good one. Okay. I think that's it. Nobody else? Nope. Oh, Steve did have something.
Yeah, we're inspecting Upper and Lower Prior Lake and Spring Lake. Are we neglecting to some degree Fish Lake? I know that has pretty good boat traffic. And where are we at on Fish Lake?
So we didn't inspect Fish Lake in the past, but we added Fish Lake, and I can't remember the number of hours. It's either like 40 or 80 hours for Fish Lake this year. So we're gonna do a few weekends in like the busier time of the year, like in the summer, maybe one. I think it was one week in June, one in July, and one in August, if I remember right. Just to kind of start getting some sort of data, and if we see that there is a lot more traffic than we're aware of, then we would maybe, want to ask for more inspections next year.
Yeah, it has a little bit smaller parking area, so maybe the volume isn't quite that high, but I think it's good to do those inspections on Spring Lake.
And then I wanted to give an update on eyelids as well. So for those that aren't aware of eyelids, this is an automated video inspection camera that is set up to record boats launching into the lake. And we as staff can view those videos, but we actually hire a company to look at the videos for us and look for any sort of vegetation or potentially invasive species that are attached to the boat while they are launching. So this is a brand new program, and we just installed the camera on May 13th, so the day before fishing opener. I just wanted to point out that this camera does record video, but not audio, so it can't record what people are saying. So they reviewed 279 launches, and looking at the video, the quality is really good. We've seen people like looking at the unit, like they notice it and they're coming up trying to see what it's all about. So that's good that they're noticing it. And they did notice just by looking at the videos that there was like 4 boats from 4 different states. And they saw that there were weeds observed on the boats after coming out of the lake, but they didn't see any going while they were launching going into the lake. So that was good. As I mentioned last month, we wanted to try to do an experiment where we watch them without the audio part of this video of the eyelids. So the eyelids is capable of telling them to check their boat and put their drain plug in and things like that. But we wanted to do a study to see like how well do they respond without the audio versus with the audio after we turn that on. So this period of time we did not have any audio on, but it didn't really work out as we were hoping, just because we've noticed that the angle of the camera where it's pointing, people aren't actually stopping like right in front of the camera to check their boat and prep their boat. So we're not exactly sure where, it's not like a certain spot that everybody checks it. So that's unfortunate that we don't really have any data on like how many people are actually checking their boats, but we still can see if there's any vegetation hanging from them. So that's good, but we are thinking about angling the camera a little bit so that we can see a different angle. The other thing that we noticed is that, like, even if we see that there's vegetation on the boat where the camera's angled, you can see that the top picture, well, both of those pictures are the camera. So if there is vegetation and they back into the lake, there is like kind of this blind spot where they could potentially stop and take the vegetation off of the boat. So like if we wanted to potentially give a citation or something in the future, we wouldn't know if they stopped to take that out outside of the camera view. So it's just kind of, it's the very beginning of this program, and we're learning a lot this first month. So we're gonna try to turn that camera, see if we can get that so it's angled better. We have some ideas that we're not quite sure if it's going to work or not. We had thought about maybe even like painting a spot on the tar, like stop here and inspect your boat, right in front of the camera to get a little bit more action in front of the camera. What else? So next week we are planning on turning the audio on and installing a larger sign. So after we do that, we will be able to see if we're getting more attention of like just people looking at it, because how many are walking up to it to read the sign and stuff. So I think we'll have a better idea of that. And it looks like Joni wants to step in. Oh, okay. And then last month there was a question about the legality of the videos and whether we can give citations. So we are in the process of talking to our attorney to look into that. We don't have the answers at this time, but we will ask for their feedback on that. And then depending on what we hear from the attorney, if we want to follow through with looking at giving citations for the boats, we'll kind of look at that once we get more feedback. But at this point, we certainly don't have enough. We wouldn't, with that blind spot, we wouldn't be able to give a citation just because I could potentially have removed that vegetation before launching into the lake. So, yeah, again, we're learning as we go. This is an experimental year, trial and error and all that. So it seems to be going well. I'm really happy with the quality, and yeah. Do you have anything to add?
Right. So once again, just Chair and managers, we have put a question into our attorney. 2 questions. Once again, in response to Manager Boyle's question, is this legal? Can we record? And then secondly, looking for his opinion on whether we could use the video as a basis for citations. So the question went out, we just didn't give him enough turnaround time to get the response before this meeting. We also did find out that with the inspectors that are out there, waterfront restorations, they inquired with the county sheriff, and once again, the sheriff is really overburdened this year with the high level of activity that's happening on the lake. And so they have been directed to, if there are any potential citations or issues, to reach out to the DNR's conservation officer. So my sense is that, if there is any sort of follow-up based on what we detect with eyelids, that we would also then need to be working with the DNR as well. And then lastly, I think just to clarify, with the angle of the device, the idea is that we're thinking to see if we can just rotate that camera a little bit so that we can actually track that vehicle all the way into the water. So if it detects some vegetation on the boat or on the trailer, we actually have evidence of that going into the water.
Gotcha, thanks. Just, Kurt, I'm at one question. So I'm glad this is a pilot project this year. You're in the very first stages of the pilot, so I think this is all great learning. I'm curious, though, about the location of the camera. Did the vendor actually come out and help us and look at the launch and decide where this was located and talk with you about that, or was that left to us? I didn't.
Yes, we did work with a vendor. We had 2 potential locations, and
Trade-offs for both.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was either here or down closer to the launch. And we thought that this would be a better spot for catching people, like getting their boat ready. But
Okay.
it's not.
We'll find out. Awesome. Thanks. Go ahead, Kurt.
I want to pursue this enforcement thing. Employee Keller Miller told us months ago when we were first considering eyelids that she approached the Scott County Sheriff and he turned her down flat for doing this. Now, is it the county sheriff's obligation to give out tickets on something like this? I know on the water it's definitely a sheriff, but on the landing is it different vis-a the DNR officer? Am I missing something there? I mean, this Fogarty guy, how did he get involved in this?
Mr. Chair, Manager Hennis, once again, we felt that, a precedent for us was just actually how are the actual boat inspectors, waterfront restorations, how are they handling when they find violations? And, what we found out from them is that they are going directly to the DNR's conservation officer. So we were looking at that as a precedent of probably where we would end up going as well.
And they have authority to ticket people, and for those and to pursue that in the courts if they don't comply.
I don't know for sure. I can definitely confirm that.
And I know I had suggested to you to talk to County Attorney Hoshavar, but if this works out, that's fine. Thank you.
There is an ability to ticket. I have a neighbor that was ticketed in the spring putting boats in. They found zebra mussels from the previous year. I mean, they came from our lake. These people don't boat around, but they were fined. I don't remember who, but they received, and I thought it was either $75 or $150. So, and so I'm assuming it was the DNR that was actually staffing it at the time before our own peeps. So I gotta assume that's who it is, but they do have the ability to fine.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Anybody else? Nope. Okay.
I was just going to play one video so you can kind of get an idea of what we can see. Got a little coming up here. So just wanted to show off our new truck and our boat. So and there's Shauna in the back. So there's just an example. So I wanted to add a couple slides about algae because we've been getting a lot of concerns from citizens about algae, and for whatever reason, it seems like the conditions are right for what we call filamentous algae this year, and I believe this is probably a combination of low water and high temperatures, and when you don't have as much water, it heats up faster, which creates algae. But whatever it is, it appears to be Mother Nature because it's happening in most all of the lakes and ponds around the area. So it's not, we wouldn't believe that there's anybody dumping anything in the lake that's causing this algae. But when people see this, it does, look gross and potentially dangerous. So I wanted to show a couple pictures to explain the difference between filamentous algae, which is not harmful, and the blue-green algae, which does have potential to be dangerous and contain a toxin that can even kill your dogs if they drink the water. So we can never say that the water is safe. I would never recommend drinking the water. You never know what's in there. There could be E. coli from a goose or something too that you could get sick from. But in general, filamentous algae itself is not dangerous. You can see it's floating on the surface in this picture. And here's a couple more pictures up close. Sometimes it has these bubbles. It looks like it's kind of bubbling up in that top left picture. If you grab it, it's kind of stringy and filamentous, so that's one easy way to tell that it is filamentous algae and not blue-green algae. And then in the bottom picture, you can see the strands coming from the filamentous algae, but then also it does like to attach to plants and things growing underneath the surface of the water, which looks and feels a little bit more slimy than the stuff that floats at the top. And it might float to the top and drop back down and keep doing that. But you can see the water is pretty clear beside, these mats of filamentous algae. Typically, blue-green algae doesn't grow this time of year, but it can. But we would expect to find that more in the heat of the summer, July, August, and they say it kind of has more of like a paint-like look, almost like green paint is spilled into the water and floating on the surface like this. The bottom picture, you can actually see the blue-green color that it sometimes gets. Otherwise, it is that bright green. And if you wanted to grab this, it would not be stringy at all like the filamentous. So this is the only algae we have in this area that carries this toxin. It's called microcystin, and it has a potential to carry that toxin. It doesn't always, but we just always assume that it does. And we can't test for that. Like if we did test for the toxin, by the time you got the results back, it would be like a week later and not applicable anymore. And also, even if it did come back negative, it could be 5 feet over, there would be a blob that has a toxin in it. So we always just tell people, when in doubt, best keep out. I know it's not a great thing to hear, but I always recommend people just Google pictures of blue-green algae, become familiar with it. So like if you are concerned for your child's safety or anybody's safety, that's the one that you want to look out for.
Jamie, can you comment about, again, what time of year? Now, I know that one picture is one that I submitted on that far right. That's the edge of our dock.
Yep.
But do you remember what time of year this usually comes in?
I would expect July and August. Just
Okay.
the heat of the summer, but some of these pictures were from Upper Pryor, and that was a really late fall bloom. And I think 2016, we had just really, really bad algae bloom. And I think it's just mostly dependent on the heat. If it was a warm fall, it would have more of a potential to grow the blue-green algae.
Okay. So even the heat that we're having right now wouldn't be sufficient in duration, maybe? I see Joni's, going back.
Right, no, that's, it could, yeah,
Okay.
just more commonly in the summer, so I think it's just less likely to happen now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, just a quick update on the carp management program. So right now we're doing a bunch of our different strategies. One is that we're tracking those radio tags and pit tags and using cameras, but we're also using volunteers. So on our website, we've got an interactive map that Shauna had created where you can click on the map and put a point on it and tell us where you've seen the carp. And that's been really helpful to get these little tips when we're doing these electrofishing efforts. I just had a call this morning from somebody who called me and let me know they were seeing some carp pool up in a bay in Lower Pryor, so we're beginning to scope that out. So if anybody's listening at home, please keep calling us with your carp reports and your carp espionage. It's been really helpful. We're also working on blocking with biocontrols and spawning traps, and then removing them through electrofishing and also those traps. So with the biocontrols, the most exciting thing that we've been doing lately is just stocking bluegills in the upstream wetlands. We stocked 3 locations, and if you go to the next slide, there's a fun video that one of our interns created. we stocked bluegills at 3 different locations, stocking, like the video said, 3,400. One was in a wetland connected to Upper Prior Lake, and the other 2 were in wetlands connected to Spring Lake. And just like the video said, like a real big shout out to Spring Lake Association, Prior Lake Association, and the Rotary Club. We really appreciate them. The lake associations even brought their muscle, and they helped us haul the bluegills into the ponds. Northwoods Pond was especially difficult, so thank you extremely to the Prior Lake Association. Yeah, so it went really well. We had a lot of support from the community. And then we're also right now working on the spawning traps. So if you recall, last year we had great success in these 2 traps. One is in Mud Bay, over by the Arctic Lake outlet, and the other one is off of the Silt Pond, the push trap on Spring Lake. And the problem with them this year is that we just haven't had enough rain. So those carp are attracted to that flowing water coming out of those 2 outlets, and we just haven't had any. So they haven't been coming to those as much as we'd like to see. So we've been pushing the electrofishing this spring, just getting out there as much as possible. If you live on the lake, you've probably seen our boat out there. But yeah, so the spawning traps, we're working on thinking up some alternative things that we could do at these locations, maybe moving the push trap into deeper water, maybe using the speakers to spook the carp out of the Newman trap area and be ready with them on the other side with our electrofishing boat. We're just trying to be a little bit creative here this spring and into summer. And then with the electrofishing, like I said, we've just been out there a whole lot. If you see our boat, feel free to wave to us and flag us down, but we've been working on it really hard this spring. I didn't quite get a total from Jeff as far as how many removals we've had in each lake, but I know we've gotten like thousands of pounds out. So Joe's taken them. Some of the tribe has taken them, and we appreciate those people who are taking the carp for just for biomass. So go to the next one. So that's the carp update. And then we've also recently done an education and outreach effort with the Twin Oaks Middle School. This is part of our MS4 program, and it's also part of our school partnerships program. So we were out at Twin Oaks presenting to the entire 7th grade, which is about 200-300 kids. And we're trying to pair this with our wetland assessment program. So we have it in our 10-year plan as well as this year's budget to start doing integrated a biological index to assess the bugs and the plants to tell us how well that wetland's doing. And so we took like a little micro sample of that and did it with the schools. It was a nice, quick, easy program. We already pretty much had a lot of these materials already together, and the kids just loved it. The teachers thought they got a lot out of it. And if this is successful going forward, we can actually have the schools monitor 1 or 2 wetlands for us every year. It's incredibly cost-effective in determining how well these wetlands are doing. And for the storage and infiltration projects, so we completed substantial construction on the Sutton Lake outlets. But after talking to the 2 landowners afterwards, they had some concerns about the rocks that were around the outlets and accessibility. So Chad Sandy wanted to be able to drive over this with an ATV, and John on the east side of the project wanted to be able to walk over it. And the rocks were so big they couldn't traverse it very well. And so we're going to be doing a change order. And although, like according to our governance manual, we don't need approval from the board if it's, under 10% or less than $10,000, which this change order will be. I just wanted to let you guys know that we're working with them on it in case you end up talking to Chad or John. Another thing that we were exploring at this location too is that Chad was concerned that we had to take out that access coming off of the highway into the project area. And originally we pushed it to the side because the county wanted us to get a permit and do more engineering work, and it would have slowed down construction. So we kind of pushed that to the side, but now we're kind of re-exploring that. We had a $414,000 budget on this, but we had those bids that came in really low. So right now, even with the change order, we're still under $300,000. So we have budget for it. It'll provide us with better access going forward, and it'll appease Chad because he really liked the easier access going down. So we're going to explore that, but that is something that we're going to have to bring back to the board if that moves forward.
So you're actually going to be putting a driveway in?
A culvert, so that the entrance isn't going so steep. We'll have to, go out more, but then there'll be a culvert underneath.
I know it's a very steep slope going down that ditch with your car or whatever, very steep. And of course, County 10 has no shoulder. It's edge of the road, blammo, right down. Thank you.
Yeah, Maggie, it's great that we're taking care of some of the landowners up there to sort of do this right, knowing that we're going to be exploring some other ones coming forward, so I think that's great. Maggie, I wanted to ask, because I saw in the write-up that we got 5,000 to 6,000 pounds of carp out of Mud Bay at the end of May through electrofishing. That's outstanding, right? I mean, is that not a record for
Mr. Chair, managers, yeah, so I'll have to get the official numbers from Jeff, but yeah, it's been a lot.
Yeah. This is the time they're starting to spawn, right? I mean, that's my recollection. That's my front yard, actually. But so I think that's awesome. Nicely done. I did want to end up asking you, Maggie, it looks like on the Spring Lake West, been unsuccessful with the one landowner, and so you're on to option number 2. Is that the way I understand that?
Yep, Mr. Chair, managers. So we've been exploring it with the other family across the road, and I had Carl do some analysis to see what's possible there. The elevation isn't quite right like it is on the other side of the road, so it'll be slightly more expensive. Just kind of exploring that, seeing how much area we can give up and how big we can make that feature. But we're still figuring that out.
So option A, did we get turned down, or we just weren't able to get any answer?
Mr. Chair, managers, it's been crickets. I've had the neighbor try to contact them and the SWCD and us. I'm not sure what's going on with them. We'll keep trying, of course. We never give up, but crickets right now.
I know you're working it. Thanks, Maggie. Anybody else? Nope. I think that's it. Thank you, ladies.
Oh, Maggie, do we still have hopes of getting the Spring Lake West project started this summer yet, or with all this landowner difficulty, what does it look like?
Mr. Chair, Manager Hennis, not likely this year. Even if we did have landowner acceptance of what we want to do, we'd still want to pursue some grant funding, and that takes a little time.
Thank you. Okay, item 4.2, our annual financial audit. Andy, it looks like you are up, sir. If you probably know enough, remember to turn that on and introduce yourself for the record, please.
Good evening. I'm Andy Berg with Abdike & Myers, here to present the annual audit. I'll go through a short presentation and be happy to take any questions. So what I'll cover today is the end results of the audit, our audit opinion. We'll look at the results of the district from an entity-wide perspective, but then also look at each individual fund, your governmental fund, your general fund, your implementation fund, and then the JPA MOA funds. So the end result of the audit is that we issue an opinion on your financial statements. We issued a modified or clean opinion. The best opinion you can get. As part of the audit, we do gain an understanding of the district's internal controls. We're not given an opinion on the effectiveness of the controls, but use that for planning the audit. If we did see something, we potentially might have an internal control finding. Please report no audit findings. As part of the audit, we also issue a report on Minnesota legal compliance. We test a number of different areas, anywhere from cash and investments to contracting and bidding, claims and disbursements. Clean report there too. I did want to point out, last year you did have one Minnesota legal compliance finding related to credit card documentation. In our sample this year, all the receipts were there, so that finding is gone. I'm happy to report that. So now jumping into the numbers part of it, this slide here is a statement of net position. So this includes all the different funds of the district. I'll point out a couple items there. Your total cash and investments at the end of the year was just over 1.9 million, with total assets being just under 2.9 million. You had liabilities of about 858,000, and then looking at the bottom section there, your net position. Total net position at just over 2 million with about 884,000 in capital assets. I have restricted of about 462,000 related to that outlet channel, and then you have unrestricted of about 706,000. And then we'll look at the individual makeup of those on the next slides. Starting with the general fund, here we give you a 5-year history of your ending general fund balance, which is indicated by that blue line. You'll see since 2017, that number has been increasing as a dollar amount and as a percentage of your next year's budget. You'll see it's at about 205% of your 2021 budget. Part of the increase in percentage is the dollar amount going up, but also your 2021 budget decrease from your 2020 budget. So the red line gives you your budget history increasing from 2017 to 2020, and then a little bit of a drop in 2021. Now looking at the activity in the general fund, so that increase in fund balance, giving you a comparison of budget to actual. Total revenues came in relatively close to budget at about $228,800. Expenses under budget by about 33,000. So total expenses 193,000. So revenues over expenses about 35,000, which increased the budget ending at the 341,000. Now moving on to the implementation fund. This is a fund where your main activity of your programs and projects goes through. Again, giving you a comparison of budget to actual. Total revenues just under 2 million, below budget by about 163,000, mainly related to grant revenue. Total expenses at about 2.3 million, under budget by about 470,000. Fluctuation really on timing of some of the programs and projects. So total revenue under expenses by about 347,000, where the budget had it under by 653,000. You did transfer out 242,000 to other funds, about 91,000 budgeted for your portion of the JPA MOA agreement, and then you transferred out an additional about 153,000 into your debt fund to pay off the debt a little bit early. So total decrease about 590,000 compared to the budget of 743,000 decrease. So ending fund balance about 650,000 in your implementation fund. The other two funds of the district are your JPA MOA operations fund and your emergency fund. Both of these are the restricted fund balance. So this is where that about $91,000 transfer from your implementation fund went in. At the end of the year, there's about 463,000 of fund balance compared to about 400,000 in 2019. So an increase of about 62,000. So that is a summary of the results of the audit and the financial information. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Andy. Anybody? Seeing none, then actually, Andy, I did want to ask, and I know I've asked this probably, I think, the first time I came on here, but I remember just the one thing, again, I get struck by seeing that liability on the para, right? Our so statewide. Is that, can you please remind me, and I should remember this because I asked, at least it was a couple of years ago, can you remind me, is that anything that actually that we are doing that's kicking the can down the road, or is it that's a state law?
So you do recognize about, I think it was about 311,000 of a net pension liability. It is an accounting standard, so you're required to recognize it to be in compliance with the accounting standards. What it is it's a state multi-employer pension plan. So all entities, whether you're a watershed district, city, school, county, contribute to that. And based on your contributions, the allocation of the net pension liability at para, each of those entities recognizes their proportionate share. So really, you're never going to have to pay that full liability. What you have to pay is your required contributions in during the year, which you include in your annual budget.
But it's just highlighting that the state has a gap in funding and it's growing. Is that the takeaway from when I reviewed this?
I don't remember what your proportionate share was last year. It's potentially, it could go up. I know the state does have a 20, 30-year plan for funding the pension plan, but there currently right now, based on the actuarial evaluation, there is a gap or a net pension liability.
Okay. So Andy, I don't think when, in reviewing the audit, there's a couple of things that came up, and I'll end up asking my colleagues. I don't remember when the alum treatment, remember when we had some budget that we thought was available or some dollars set aside in the alum? Was that, because I couldn't remember if that was the very end of 2019, that then all of a sudden that went away when we were planning for 2020, when we were going to do our big alum treatments last year? Or was it in 2020 as we were getting close to that when all of a sudden when we started digging in, it's like 150 or 180K went away? Was that?
The end of 2019.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid. Bruce, do you have any recollection? Was that the end of 2019?
You mean
And so,
the alum
yes,
amount?
when that,
We've been budgeting so much for alum each year.
yeah, but I know, and we were seeing some budget numbers that were suggesting we had a certain level in there available for the alum treatment, and that got adjusted. And I was thinking too, it was 2019, but I just wasn't sure.
I think that
But-
sounds right.
So Andy, would something like that, so you've probably picked up what I was trying to explore, and then, so in an audit, would something like that have gotten picked up by you or should get picked up by you in an audit if numbers being shared with us in our financial statements suggested we had a higher reserve amount for alum and then it went away? And I mean, this was a material amount that went away in some of our financial reports. Is this something that would get uncovered in an audit?
It would be shown in like this slide here where, the actual amounts would show up in the year that you spend them. If you're budgeting them, over a multi-year period to build that fund balance and then going to spend them, that would show up each year in the final budget amounts. Now, if you did have your original budget and then a final budget in the actual financial statements, both of those are shown. So if you did an official budget amendment, that would show.
Yeah, and so because you wouldn't see what was shared with the board as what the available numbers were, that wouldn't necessarily, if there was a mistake in that information, those financials shared with us, that wouldn't be something that would get picked up. If it really wasn't there, your audit, well, if it disappeared, your audit would probably pick it up. Is that a fair?
If you're talking about monthly or quarterly reporting to the board, we don't necessarily compare each one of those. We may look at one just to see what information the board's getting, more from an internal control perspective versus, this ties out to the monthly reporting. So that piece of it probably won't get picked up in the audit.
Okay. And then the last one, just because it's recently was uncovered that we had some misstatements and some payroll stuff. Is that one that you guys dig into in payroll? Do you guys do any tests with respect to the payroll?
Yeah, we look at the payroll, do a number of different tests, some specific walkthroughs, picking a sample of specific periods and employees, and then also do some analytical testing, comparing it to budget and actual. So there is some payroll tests. We're not looking at every single paycheck and payroll run.
Okay. Because we did have some errors last year, and again, I'm not sure they would have qualified as material, but they meant something to the people who got impacted by those, our employees. And so is that something, is that something you would have dug into at all?
We, if we asked a question, it was brought to our attention, we would have looked at it to see that it was resolved and also to see if it would materially affect the financial statements.
Okay, and I'm not sure it did, and I know it's been resolved now, and at least we're on it, so we're aware of the problem and we're fixing it, but I just, anyway, I just thought I'd see if that was something that you poked around in.
Yeah, and I don't recall off the top of my head what exactly we looked at or if we were aware of it during this audit. It's potentially that we were investigated, but I don't know
Okay.
off the top of my head.
Okay, thanks, Andy.
I do have
Bruce?
a question. On note 1, it's a summary of significant accounting policies. The bottom, I don't know if there's no page number. Oh, yeah, there it is on top, page 52. The district has formally adopted a fund balance policy for the general fund. I might be fairly new here, but I didn't know we had that. What is that policy?
We
I
have,
don't know off the top of my head what the policy is, but
We have a formal,
I believe you have a policy, and it may indicate the level that you want to maintain in your general fund. That's typically
know we
what the
talked-
policy states.
I think there is one, Bruce. If I
Yeah, but-
recall, when we did the governance manual, Kurt, you might, back when we reviewed our governance manual, you know, back when Fred was leading our band, was that, do you recall? Because I'm thinking that's where that was. Is that in a governance manual?
I believe so. I know Joni and I, when Joni was reviewing, we updated to the most recent fund balance policy.
okay,
Okay,
okay.
thanks. Anybody else? Yes, Steve, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, a question on the audit. As far as the monthly Visa bill, you audit the receipts for a typical monthly audit or Visa bill. How many months of the year do you verify that all the receipts are there? Do you take like a sample of 2 or 3 months, or how many do you do?
We'd typically do 1 or 2 months.
Okay, thank you.
Looks like that's it. Thank you, Andy. Thanks for coming down here. Thanks for all the work. Staff too. Joni, oh yeah, Joni's got a question. Sorry. Go, Joni.
No, actually, I don't have a question, Mr. Chair and managers. I am asking, though, that you do accept the audit and authorize us to submit it to Bowser and the State Auditor's Office.
Great. Thanks, Joni. So, any
So moved.
moves?
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries 5-0. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Joni, for reminding us to follow the rules. Thanks again, Andy. Appreciate it. Okay, we're on to the item 4.3, the 2020 water quality report cards for Spring and Upper Prior.
Okay, late last year, I had put together some water quality monitoring report cards for most of the lakes, and that data went through the end of 2019. And so the board at that time had asked, you know, what the impact of the alum treatment was. So this is just a quick addition to those report cards. So I went back and added 2020 to the Spring Lake and Upper Prior Lake water quality monitoring report cards. When we had originally started these, our plan was to do one every 3 years, so it just so happened that the end of that third year didn't catch that. So this is the new water quality report card for Spring Lake. And it's the report card is essentially the same with just one more year of data. So I'll go over it briefly again. There are the 3 main water quality indicators that we always look at when we talk about whether a lake is considered impaired with the state water quality standards: phosphorus, chlorophyll A, and clarity, which is the Secchi depth. So we put these report cards together to make kind of a more simple, easy to read pamphlet for the public. So something that we can hand out when we go to events, like if we're doing this Chamber Fest coming up, like we might have something like this on our table so people can get a good idea of how the water quality is in their lake without going into a lot of detail with graphs and whatnot. So we have each parameter has a grade, and so A through F, like a regular report card. And so we have the grade is kind of the average of the last 3 years, so kind of the more recent data that we're seeing. And then that history with the graph, the line, That's the last 10 years, just so you can kind of see a better idea of how it's changed over time. And in that history column, that orange line, that's the state water quality standard. In general, we want to stay below that line, and if you're below that line, you're meeting that water quality standard. Now, you need to stay below that line for a consistent period of time to be considered for taking to be taken off of an impaired list if the lake is already considered impaired. So we're starting on Spring Lake. You can see the phosphorus and clarity has been dipping down below that line, and chlorophyll A is just barely touching it. But for the water quality to be taken off of that impaired status, you have to meet 2 of the 3 standards. So this is looking good. So I don't know where I'm going with that, but we're adding on the 2020 data from the alum treatment that was done in the beginning of 2020 did affect the grade for the last few years slightly. And then to add on the last column is just whether that parameter is statistically improving or if there's no trend or declining.
Mr. Chair and managers, I would just say, going back to last year's report card, that Spring Lake did show an increase in grade on all 3 of the indicators from the report card from last year.
Awesome.
Yes.
It is. It's awesome. Go ahead, Kurt. You had a question?
Jamie, since I've been on the board, which is 8 years now, we've continuously had this ongoing chlorophyll A issue, getting bad grades. Do you have any thoughts on that? Any long-term projections or any suggestions or advice?
How do we filter a lake?
It does seem to be a harder parameter to meet with a lot of the lakes where we see that it is reaching the phosphorus and the clarity goal, but not the chlorophyll. It is a kind of a direct indicator of how much algae is in the lake. So it is the one standard that I don't believe that changed. Now, I don't want to get into the weeds, but we had a site-specific standard for Spring Lake where we went back and we actually changed the goals that Spring Lake needed to meet based off of like pre-settlement conditions. We did cores in the lake bottom to see what was more realistic for Spring Lake. So the phosphorus standard did get a little bit more lax after they showed, like, even before humans were here, we wouldn't have met this goal. But I don't recall if chlorophyll A was one of the standards that they actually looked at, but I'm not answering your question, but I don't know. I mean, obviously, if we can continue dosing with alum, it is helping. It really helped last year. We did a stronger dose than we had planned on doing, so that helped.
So, well, let me ask it this way, because I think we've actually chatted about this once before, where obviously we have something that we know that we can deal with phosphorus that's in the lake, and we're trying to deal with everything coming into the lake in phosphorus and sediment. But I think we've asked this question before. Are you aware of anything that we could do for the chlorophyll that's already in the lake that we could eliminate or reduce or filter or something? Are there any solutions out there that you've ever come across that we haven't?
Normally, it's, like the higher the more phosphorus, the more algae grows.
Right.
So it's kind of a direct relationship.
It's a food source for the algae, right?
Yeah, but it's not.
But if the chlorophyll's in there, does it go away if?
Yeah, it's a direct. Yeah, it changes.
So it will go
where
away if
it's
the
what
phosphorus
grows.
goes away. It's the food source. Mm-hmm. And will it die off, or is it just there and
It's
waiting
like,
for more
it's
phosphorus?
like algae. Like when the algae dies, the chlorophyll drops.
Okay, so maybe longer term, by eliminating the food source, the algae will slowly get reduced.
Yeah, I'll look into that.
Okay.
'Cause I can't answer that.
Thanks. Well, this is great stuff, everybody. Anyone?
Yeah, and again, this was the first year in recorded history that we did get below that line for all three of those parameters, so that's really exciting. I mean,
It
of course,
is.
yeah.
Again, anecdotal, I live in it. I literally do. I live and play and in the water, and it's been outstanding. The warmth and a whole lot of boat traffic has stirred some stuff up. But still, I believe by now, usually we would have had more going, but that's anecdotal, I know that. But I'm telling you, it's still a joy to go into the water right now. I can see my legs, I can see my feet when we're in the water playing. And I literally have heard from neighbors up and down the shoreline and the folks that I run into the lake that they're very pleased with this result. Joni and I were at the Rotary presenting some of our watershed activities and thanking them also for their donation. And again, so actually I'm gonna add this because he came up to me after. So Jim Gilbertson, I don't know if I can say this now. Jim, I apologize. I've already outed you, sir. Jim Gilbertson is a real estate agent on Spring Lake, and he's been very successful. He's lived on both Spring and Upper Pryor, and he said, Mike, I can guarantee you that the work that you've done have impacted the valuations on the homes on this lake, and that they are selling because of the water quality is so much better. And he provided, I mean, he's been around for a very long time selling properties on there, and he says this is a really big deal, what you guys have done for that. And I know we don't always sort of hear that, and he had said he didn't want to talk about that, you know, at the Rotary in the public portion of this, and I was like, Jim, I wish you would have, because it's something that, you know, that is something that speaks to. We wonder whether people pay attention to what we do. You know, we care about it, right? Staff and the group up here and the volunteers, we care, but not knowing whether the community is aware of it. But it does have an impact. I'm telling you, for those who live and play in it that I hear from, and Jim Gilbertson, who sells the homes on the lake, the value it's having for the people's homes, that they're now able to play in clean, clear water. Better for the dogs, better for the kids, you know. So it matters. It's great when we hear that, and I'll continue to try and remember to share those stories when I hear them. But so it's awesome. You know, we don't hear very often the good stuff that we do. It's having an impact, and it's not the alum treatment. It's Maggie digging in the carp fighter there to go battle the beast. And sorry, Steve, I know you hate it when I call them the beast, but I still think they are. So anyway, I'm off the soapbox. So it's good stuff. Thanks for updating these for us, Jamie. All right, are we on to 4.4 then? Or do you have?
I just
oh
have
yeah,
a
right.
little bit
Sorry.
more. So-
Speaking of Spring Lake, sorry.
Yeah, so we did also add a back page to this. So Shauna put this together for us just to make it a little bit more useful for the public that maybe wants to grab this report card off of our table or something. We added that bathymetry map. So that's the contours of the lake bottom. We created that map using our BioBase equipment and software. So it's a really pretty nice contour map. And then just kind of on the left there, like little pat on the back, like what are we doing to improve water quality in the lakes. So, and then just to say, this is the Upper Pryor Lake report card as well. So adding on the 2020 data. I don't know if there's anything, I think this next slide just kind of sums it up a little bit better. Same back page for Upper Pryor. I just compared the last few report cards that we had for these lakes. So as you go down, like the first one is phosphorus, you know, it had been consistently higher, and it did, both Upper and Spring did improve, obviously, with phosphorus in 2018 to 2020. Chlorophyll A, yeah, it's a little bit stubborn. So the Upper Pryor, the grade didn't change. The results changed, but this is, just keep in mind, these are an average of the last 3 years, so it's not like, maybe just wasn't enough to change that grade in 1 year of results, but it did improve it on Spring Lake. And then the clarity, you can see improved on Upper, but Spring Lake is kind of interesting. You see the clarity went from a C to an F and a C, and that's kind of like what you'll get, I guess, since we are manipulating the data with an alum treatment, and our second alum treatment wasn't quite as strong, and we saw the results going up a little bit faster. Kind of shows you that if we are going to keep the water quality at this level, we are probably going to have to be consistent with our alum treatments as well. I know we're trying to do things in the upper watershed and, our ferric chloride treatment and the carp, but it is one of the most effective ones. So if we're going to keep the levels here, we might need to talk about our next one once the levels start creeping back up again. But overall, yeah, it's a phenomenal improvement. So any other questions on the report cards?
Thanks, Jamie. Anybody? Steve?
Thank you, Jamie. As far as Spring and Upper Prior Lake, where are we as far as getting them off the impaired list? Are we halfway there? Are we getting closer? What kind of timeline are we on?
So if you're looking at these columns with the history, again, we want to stay below that orange line. So once we're below that orange line for a few years, we can potentially bring this data to the PCA and have them look at our data and say, look, our lake is getting better, can we get off the list? And then they have a meeting with the PCA, and they look at our data and they talk to us and they say, well, how do we know that it's going to stay here? Like, what did you do? Is this going to be a permanent solution? So this is where I kind of am unsure about what they would say if we're doing this with an alum treatment. So would we have to say, well, we're going to continue doing alum treatments, or until it starts going up? But it's not just a black and white, 3 years in a row, you're meeting the standards, you're off the list. It's a conversation to be had.
Okay, thanks for the information.
Thank you. It looks like that's it. So we'll move on to the item 4.4, the watershed management study. Draft project charter. Joni?
Mr. Chair and managers, so we are teaming up right now with Scott Soil and Water Conservation District, along with Scott WMO, to really look at a study trying to determine what is the best government structure to deliver water resource solutions most efficiently, effectively, and collaboratively for county residents. And what you have before you is a draft of a charter, which really outlines what are the goals and objectives of this study. Who are the proposed stakeholders? We have a proposed team of a steering committee, a project management team, and also a technical advisory team who would be participating over the course of this study. The charter outlines what are some of the proposed work tasks and deliverables that would come out of this study. And so right now, this is a draft, once again, that we are bringing forward for discussion. And then, once again, Manager Loney and Manager Miser are on the steering committee for this study. And it is my assumption that they will be taking any comments that you are bringing forward this evening to back forward to any suggested edits to this charter, ultimately for its adoption and for us to move forward with this study. Actually, we have our first technical team meeting already scheduled for this Thursday at 1 p.m.
Great. Thank you, Joni. So I know Bruce has been weighing in on this. So Frank, Kurt, Steve, any thoughts? Is this looking okay to you? I'm seeing a nod from Steve.
I think
Kurt?
it's promising. It's obviously Leslie Vermillion has done a lot of work because the speed work and something like this is always heavy lifting. So certainly praise for her. But I mean, it's good. It looks more optimistic. I'm more optimistic now than it was a couple months ago. I think it's actually got some life.
Thank you. And first of all, I think more of the credit's going to go to Brad Davis. I think he he's doing the hard work here, just so you know. Leslie's a fan and a supporter of this. However, I think it's one of those things, Brad's doing the real work here, so. Bruce?
I was going to say, we've had a couple of go-arounds with this draft, with everybody, so it has been vetted pretty good, but we still want to hear if you had any comments, or, because they want us to approve it to move forward.
Yep, so that's why this is the first chance that, so we've shared with you in, I think mostly in the workshops, maybe even in the public meeting, that this was happening sort of behind the scenes. This is going to take a period of time to even vet this, probably at least, a couple of years. So the goal was for us to be able to bring it forth to the rest of the board so that you have a chance to share your thoughts and comments about what it is that this is for Bruce and I, and then there'll be a little twist to that in the end of this, but so on what we do with this.
On page 85, I think the objectives are right on the money. I made out a list, and I had all 4 of these points down. I think they've targeted in on the meat part of the whole issue, so I'm fully supportive.
Great, thank you. And Steve, any further thoughts? I know you got a head nod, thumbs up. Anything else that you would share with us at this stage?
Yeah, it's probably going to take the 2 years and a lot of careful analysis, and we'll just have to see how it works out.
Great, thanks. Frank?
It's the right color, that's good. Yeah, based upon what I see right now, these things don't always follow, the rigid routine as you'd like to see them, but it's a good outline to begin with, to be sure.
Great, thanks. Well, I'm happy that I'm going to be able to hand this off to you. So I've gotten buried when I first got involved in this and helped sort of kick this off, and have helped do what I could to move this forward, but some of my life has changed. I've taken on a few other things, and so I was going to pull back from this, and Frank is going to agreed to step up and take my position. So thanks, Frank. I will probably be happy. I will go to this first meeting to participate in this charter, but I would probably ask you to join us if you have that time, and then I'm going to let you take up the mantle along with Bruce to.
Do we have another meeting scheduled?
Yeah, I think this Thursday. Is it this week or next week?
Not just the technical.
Maybe it's the following week. Sorry, yeah, I know I've
Mr.
got
Chair,
one on my
I believe
calendar.
it's the following week.
Okay, so thanks. Okay, that's it. That was discussion only. The next thing, 4.5, the draft CAC project definition and process template.
All right, Mr. Chair and managers. So we really have a very talented group of citizens as part of our Citizen Advisory Committee, and they really want to actively support the Watershed District's priorities. But once again, we need to be respectful that they are volunteers, and so we really want to make sure that we are using their time wisely. And so this is a first draft of a tool to help us improve communication between the CAC and the Board of Managers to ensure that we have a very clear project definition, and that everybody is in alignment in terms of what is the problem or the opportunity, and what are the desired end deliverables at the end of any sort of a project that they would take on. With using this tool also, we're once again wanting to use it to make sure that there is an alignment between the priorities that have been established by the Board of Managers, as well as staff's technical expertise and workload, as well as the CAC's vision for where the project is going.
Thank you, Joni. Bruce, I'm going to see as our liaison to the CAC. I know you're deeply involved in this.
Yeah,
Any thoughts? You turn your mic on, please.
Oh, sure.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'll reiterate what Joni said. We're up to 8 members now. We've kind of, no pun intended, but we've restocked the CAC. And we got some real champions there. I mean, we've got a good group of seasonal people that have been on the committee, like Mr. Winiger right here. And we got new members like Maureen Reeder over there. And we got a good mix. And I think we've had a lot of good discussion on how to get the subcommittee reports, get the right goals in set, get the right process, and not to get too far down the road on something without really accomplishing something. We don't want to get too deep and find out, whoop, we're going on the wrong path. So that's been a good discussion we've had. This template will be good to keep us aligned and so that we can see that we're moving forward on the right topic with the right process. And I think we have scheduled a joint meeting for July 29th between the board and the CAC members. We'd like to get together and have a good discussion on the goals and objectives as we see it and as they see it, get input, get feedback, and I think it would be a very helpful. I know all the CAC members agree with that. They want to get together, and I know the board members want to do that. So I think this, and it should really be an annual event that we get together with the CAC members to go over what we see and what they see, and we come out of there with a good plan moving forward. So
Awesome.
that's what I got.
Thanks, Bruce. Well, you got my full support on this. I think this looks good. Kurt?
I've been Bruce's backup when he was out in Arizona and a couple other times, so I know a little bit about this. But I can tell you right now, back in January or December, we were scrambling for members and good quality members. We were down to 4 or 5, I think, at one time. And these wonderful folks have really come through. Ben Brunette, Maureen Reeder, Christopher Crowhurst, Newman, Tom Newman, I think, or Mike Newman, and they've just been wonderful. Also, Matt Tofanelli, I believe it's pronounced. We've got some strong people. With Tofanelli is an engineer. Ben Burnett is does water resource environmental work. It's just terrific. I think we have a real bright future with the CAC. Like I say, half a year ago was a total turnaround. So I'm very positive about the future.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda. Then 4.6, the lake vegetation policy.
Mr. Chair and managers, as we've been talking about with the enhanced clarity of the water that we're seeing in the lakes, with that, we then are going to see that the sun is actually able to penetrate down deeper into the water and help facilitate the additional growth of vegetation in our lakes. And some of that vegetation is the good stuff, the native plants that we see as beneficial to the health of the lakes, and some of the plant growth may also be aquatic invasive species. So with that, some of the residents who may not really be familiar with seeing plants growing in the lake may perceive all plant growth to be weeds. And so there is an issue that we need to probably enhance and up our educational component about the benefits of native plants within our lakes and all the benefits they provide for habitat creation, nutrient uptake, and habitat. But with that, we would also, staff is asking the Board of Managers to consider developing a vegetation management policy that would, both educate but also provide guidance and clarity about the watershed district's position when it comes to maintenance activities as related to plant growth, both beneficial plant growth and invasives.
Thanks, Joni. Frank, you're up.
Is this a policy that you have to develop from scratch, or are there policies out there that could be picked from if you were to put together a policy? And then finally, what can't you do if you do this? I mean, is it a zero-sum game, or can we continue to get the other work done while we're also putting together a policy of this nature?
Mr. Chair and Manager Boyles, in developing this, yes, there are always trade-offs about how we're using staff's time to do this. I think we can do a real quick survey of other watershed districts to see if there are any comparable policies, but I'll be honest, I'm not sure that we would find it. So my sense is that a lot of this would be developed from scratch, unless I'm looking at my staff, if they have And they're saying yes, from scratch.
Well, this is an outgrowth, so to speak, just somewhat pun intended, of cleaner water, which is a good thing. But we did even get asked this at the Rotary. They asked us if this would be an upshot of cleaner water. I also, from another guy when I was on the lake, who I know it's also plays on the lake all the time, he said, well, does this mean that we're going to get more plants coming on the lake? And yes, we are. So I'm supportive of us starting to look at this, because inevitably these questions will get asked, because it's going to be a natural thing. So yes, I'm supportive of this. And Frank, good questions. Well, I figure we'll deal with those when we find out what we end up doing. First, Joni's got a response. Kurt, and then you're up. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Joni.
Mr. Chair and Manager Boyles, we are already getting questions.
Yeah. Yes.
So this is already something that staff
Starting.
has to deal with on a case-by-case basis, trying to answer questions that are coming up.
And sorry, so are people seeing it as a negative? Yes. Do they also at least comment about the clean water? No, it's okay. And it's okay if they don't? No, because that's usually the humans don't, right? I mean, people don't, which
No.
even the guy playing in the water, I said, well, what do you think of the water? Because I know he's in there. He said, well, does this mean we're now going to have plants? I said, so what about the clean water? You're in here all the time. Would you rather not play in clean water? And it was just so funny. So yeah, that's whatever. I'll take the clean water. I'm a fan. And this is good for fish habitat too. Anyway, Kurt, you're up, sir.
Well, this is one of these items, we were talking across the hall on education and outreach. This is an education and outreach thing, like Mike is talking about, getting the word out how clean water and healthy plants are good. Now, I know living on the lake for 25 years, the only thing I ever hear is, well, you look at these pictures out in, Hawaii or, Guam or wherever, or Mexico. They got all this clear blue water and they don't have any weeds, yet they got healthy water. Well, first of all, it's salt water, which is a whole different world versus fresh water. And I call it the Hawaiian syndrome. People just want white sandy beaches with sunny skies and blue skies and nothing else. Thank you.
Yes, they do. Steve, you're up.
Yeah, the fact of the matter on Lower Prior Lake, it's had 15 different native aquatic plants for the last 35 years that I've been there. The water quality has been good in Lower Prior Lake. So native aquatic plants consume phosphorus, making the water much better. Also, for the public to be able to identify the native plants that are coming back in spring and upper, perhaps there's a website out there that the public could go to and they could try to identify their plants they're looking at and make them more comfortable with the increased amount of plants. So just a suggestion.
Thank you. Anyone else? Frank?
I'd like to make
Not yet?
I'd like
Nope.
to make-
Still red. There you go. It's green.
I'd like to make a motion directing the staff to prepare a lake vegetation policy. I know it's not called for here, but I think it's good accountability. When we make a motion, second, and approve it, that puts us on the line too.
You're here.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, just because this is a little new. Any further conversation? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion carries 5-0. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Joni, staff. Okay, next item. We are on to the manager presentation and liaison updates. Does anybody have any liaison updates on the watershed-related activities only, please? Anybody? Yeah, I know. We don't want just general updates, please. Sorry, Kurt. Go ahead, Bruce.
I just have one. I've been going down to the P-lock down there by Ridge Creek and the improvements going down there, and it's starting to take shape. At some point, it'd be a nice little walk to go down there and see the improvements. They're getting, I would say by another month or two, that'd be pretty well done. And one of the things I was curious about, what's happening with the old channel. And only the channel that runs north and south, south to north, that's going to be eliminated, and the other channel will remain. So I was just curious about that. So anyway, I did check into that, and that's a scoop on that. So
And I think that's turning into, actually, Jamie's our expert, I'll let you. Isn't that turning into overflow, the previous stuff, Jamie?
I was actually looking at Carl.
Oh.
He's the real expert on
There
that
you go.
project.
Carl, isn't that overflow?
The former alignment or the original alignment of the outlet channel that ran north-south and then did a hard west turn, east-west, the east-west portion will remain, and that'll be the, I don't know what the wetland number is, but the wetland further to the east, that'll be the outflow for that wetland, and the outlet channel will be realigned and meandered through a new sediment pond and connect back up at Pike Lake Road.
Great.
Their intent, though, is to keep the main channel, the newly created channel, offline for, full growing season. So don't expect that to be, the plugs from upstream and downstream to be removed. That's at least the original. We'll get more of an update at the cooperator meeting next Thursday. But that was the original intent.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. And Steve, can you just please confirm with me, was it 5.2 you would like removed or 5.3?
5.2 I would like removed.
Great. Anybody else, anything removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the amended consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye. Aye. That motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Steve, 5.2 is yours, sir.
5.2 is the meeting minutes from last month, and on section 4.2, I have added that Manager Loney moved to approve Maureen Reeder to the CAC, and I have let Joni and Patty know about that change.
Great. Thank you. That's it. Then I would then entertain a motion to approve item 5.2, the amended meeting minutes.
Motion to approve 5.2.
Second.
Minutes.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye. Aye. That motion carries. Thanks, everybody. All right, Bruce, you are up for a treasurer's report, sir. You got 3 items tonight. I'll just let you take them all. Go for it.
Okay, well, Chairman Meiser and Administrator Geesey and I had a I think it was a go-to meeting with Chris Knopik and Laura Larson, going over what we want to see for financial statements moving forward, since we're a new accountant. It was a very productive meeting, and I really have to commend Joni for her use of her financial CPA skills and putting together a nice document that we went through. I'll summarize it, what we were trying to get CAL to perform now. And we looked at the monthly statements that we'd like to see. The treasurer's report, obviously, we need that. And looking at the revenues and budget transfers, that's something that we want to key in on. And we want a current month, year-to-date expenditure and percent of budget expended. And one of the neat things that I think Joni brought out was we want to kind of have our different categories, but maybe some sub-items under each class and category in the budget to look at things a little closer. There's a good example, I think it was from another watershed district, where we could actually take various projects and subcategorize them and get a little more detail for us to analyze and see what's going on. So that's good. The cash and investment summaries, we're going to use the existing format for that. We also, a big thing was get a year-end cash projection. We want to, and we said we want 1 year, just keep for our calendar year, have a cash flow projection so we can see how we're doing. Obviously, our cash flow is getting down, but we're going to get an influx of revenue here from the county. We should be getting one here. I haven't checked into that. I should be any day, I would hope. Yeah, it should be coming. So that's how our cash flow, it goes down, 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 and up, and then down, 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 and up. So we want to make sure we have that for the board meeting. And we'd like to have it a detail. I think we ended up not with the spreadsheet. Maybe you like the spreadsheet, Mike, and I like the graph, something like that. But anyway, some visual documentation where we could see what's going on the cash flow. So we're going to get that. Claims list, we're going to use the existing format. We're going to get a Visa expenditure list, so we'll see those expenditures, what's being done on the Visa card. Quarterly, we just want to see a balance sheet, cost analysis, the grant expenditures, we'd like to see a little more detail on that. I think that's still open a little bit what we want to do. I think, Joni, you're going to meet with staff and see what's reasonable. And on an annual basis, Dan, we want to see our budget to actual for the last 5 years. The levy summary over time. Now, we've held the levy, I think it's been the same since I've been here for 3 years in a row. Yes. So it's not a lot there, but we want to start seeing that over time. Staff cost over time, we'd like to see some of that. How is that going up or down? How is that proceeding? And revenue sources making up the budget, you know, our levy, our excess funds, carry forward, grants, etc. So those are the things that we looked at. Now, we didn't get everything done this month. I think our meeting was just like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. So they didn't have enough time. So what you see in your packet, if I find it here, is well, I actually kind of put together the snapshot again, put the funds that we have available and the expenditures or restricted funds. So right now we have end of the year or end of this month of May, $305,000 that's available for us. There's $926,000 in restricted funds, what I call restricted. So, and then they did give us a monthly budget report here, which you can look at that. And then there was what looks like a cash basis flow here, property taxes, grants, interest, and expenditures for the month. So we're going to get a lot more detail, I suspect. And Joni, did I miss anything? Go ahead and.
Mr. Chair and Manager Loney, no, I think that was a pretty good summary. So once again, just to qualify, there's going to be certain things that we're going to receive on a monthly basis. So that will be the cash balance, or the cash status, expenditures for the month and year to date in comparison to the budget, along with the cash flow analysis. The CLA was not available or able to get the cash flow pulled together for this meeting, but next month you will see that, along with all of the quarterly statements that will be put together, such as the balance sheet. So once again, there's certain things now you'll see on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, and an annual basis. So you'll keep seeing more and more as the year progresses.
So I'm gonna add something first to this. So if you recall or step back, so one of the things that we wanted to get out of our new accountant was to improve the reporting for some of the issues that we've already talked about tonight. But so what we did when Bruce and Joni and I got together, we were thinking, what other data have we heard from others who want, what your needs are? So we've put a list together of some of the stuff that both Bruce and I thought the board would need or want to hear. Joni was looking at what sort of financial reports she'd want to see from a staff perspective. So this will end up being an initial set of reports that'll come back to the board. I would envision that this will then end up becoming a workshop item so that everybody here is also seeing and feeding into whether this is meeting all of our needs. So I just, as a reminder, this isn't done. This just wasn't Bruce and Mike from the board's perspective saying this is just what we're going to get. But this will be our first cut, and we can iterate through this. But I think between the two of us, what we've put forth will be a pretty darn good picture of what we might need for the different phases of when we're doing budgeting or our monthly stuff or the cash flows. So, and I think probably the only other thing I'll add is I ended up having this image of a picture because I've heard a little bit about what happens in the grant funding to try and pull some of that data together to feed into these reports. And there's this image of a duck kind of calmly and coolly, sitting on the water and just kind of cruising, and then underneath the surface, paddling furiously is that image of this. And I kind of have a vision that maybe some of us getting our financial reports there's a lot of that furious paddling going on behind the scenes, and I know Bruce is caught up in that on our behalf, trying to wrestle this stuff down that hasn't been tying out. But CLA has heard that loud and clear, and we're going to be looking to automate some of this stuff so that there's less of that, both from a staff perspective and the board, and so that we can actually better rely on these financials and spend more time, at least Bruce as our treasurer, or whoever the treasurer might be, again, sometime in the future, can actually spend time looking at this, or maybe managing on, again, where do our investments go when we start paying interest rate again, instead of trying to just pull these reports together. So we're in process. We should have that, and we'll get a workshop item so we can all talk about this. So that's the other piece I wanted to add. Frank, you were ready to push your button? It's green.
It's green, thank you. So I just wanted to be sure, A, it's done by contract. B, it's no surprise to the contract holders.
Correct.
In other words, their cost is suddenly going to go up in the
Yep.
future now that they see what we really want. And then finally, are they really usable documents? And I'm glad to hear that there's part of this process that says, okay, here's a ream of stuff. What's of value and what is just more paper?
Those were some of the questions we're saying. What do we want to do with these reports, right, Joni? That was, I think that was mine. What do you want to get out of your reports? And so, yes. So we were asking those. I can't say for sure because we ended up having that conversation, Frank, about whether some of these, I think our agreement, Joni, you correct me if I don't capture this correctly, but I think it wasn't as specific with respect to what reports, but again, we hadn't had Joni, we hadn't sat down and sort of determined this, but I believe there was some budget to do reports. There is a potential that it goes up a little bit. I don't think I got the sense that it was a significant amount of work because the data will be in the system, so they'll put some reports together, but I think we'll get a sense for that. Did I fairly state that, Bruce and Joni? Do you think?
Yeah, we never heard them say it's going to cost
Yeah.
more. And their contract was pretty loose.
Yeah, it was, and they knew they were doing some reports, so but we also talked about it, so yeah, yep. Okay, Joni, anything you'd add? Nope. Anybody else? Seeing nothing, excellent. Moving along, and I've hid my agenda. There it is. All right, sorry. So, Bruce, that was it then on the financial report? So, thank you for leading the charge, sir. We're on to our upcoming meeting event schedule. On item number 1, our board retreat is Saturday with the, there was a correction, but I know I still have it. It's actually June 19th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Here in the city. I think, Joni, are we in Lakeview?
Yes,
Sorry,
Parkview, yes.
I tell you, it's been one of those weeks. CAC meeting Thursday, June 24th, 6:30 to 8 p.m. in Parkview conference room, and then a joint board and CAC meeting, as we talked about, Thursday, July 29th, 6 to 8 p.m. in Parkview also. So that's it. All right, I would entertain a motion. Oh, Steve? Thursday, July 29th? Is that off? Thursday, July. I would then,
Motion.
our favorite motion, go ahead. Kurt,
Motion.
go for it.
Motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second?
We have motion and a second on the floor. I assume there's no conversation on that one. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Good night, everybody.